All right. So, Brent, tell us about distracted driving.
Okay, hello everybody. We're going to talk about some things that can get in the way of our safe driving. And as we go through this, I want to think about, what's each of our driving habits and things that we do, and is there anything that could get in the way and possibly cause a crash, something that would take our awareness away or our focus away from what's most important of getting to our destination safely. So we want to talk about that today. We'll point out several things that can distract us. We'll talk about ways to prevent that and kind of drive home that purpose of why we need to be safe and not be distracted while we're driving. So that's really the goal from that today. So let's think about this. What's the problem? What's the problem with distracted driving? The state of Utah actually puts out some crash statistics every few years, and this is through the Utah Department of Public Safety. They have some information on what causes the crashes and all kinds of statistics around that, but we're specifically going to look today at what are the distracted what causes those distracted driving crashes. And so looking at this, they had some numbers that came out from 2016 where they looked at this, and they found that 9% of all crashes in the state were involving a distracted driver, which is pretty high. 54% of those distracted driving crashes were rear-end crashes where somebody's hitting into the back of somebody else, and it caused 27 deaths during that year. So we want to look at that. We want to find out what we can do to prevent issues like that. Other statistics that they had from this information was pretty informational here. Cell phones were the leading cause of distractions during that time, and that's probably no surprise. Cell phones are a huge risk. Obviously, take our eyes off the road. It can make it really, really difficult to focus. There were also other distractions inside or outside of the car. Even passengers were a distraction causing accidents. The radio, electronic devices, and what was surprising to me was number 7 came in as texting. That's a huge risk, and we'll talk some more on texting and how that applies. But that might also apply to cell phones there as well with their numbers there. So those are things that caused the distracted driving crashes in 2016. Looking at it around the state, they have certain counties that have higher rates of crashes with distracted drivers, and during this time frame, it was Cache, Utah, Weber, and Grand County having the most. So if you look at the state on here on this map, the counties in red have the most highest rate of distracted driving crashes. The blue are the intermediate, and the white are the least. So with that, we can think about where we live and where we drive on a regular basis, and are we in a zone that has a little bit higher rate of those? Is there someplace we really need to be on guard and watch and pay real close attention to as we're driving? That's something that we can learn from. And the graph on the left shows the hour of day, the time of day where the distracted driving crashes happen. And during this time frame, the peak time was during 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. where the most crashes were involving a distracted driver. And we could ask ourselves, well, why is that? Why do we see more crashes during that time? There could be a few reasons. Could be the end of the day, it's rush hour, people are trying to get home, and they're maybe tired from working a long shift that day. They might be thinking about what they have to do when they get home, and they might be calling or doing things after work. And so those are things that we need to think about. If we find ourselves in that time, that time of day, or we're tempted to do things that distract us, we need to really think about the consequences, and hopefully we can learn from that. They looked at who were causing the most distracted driving crashes, and they put it down by age, and surprisingly, year after year we see this when we look at these numbers, but it's always the younger drivers that have more distracted driving crashes. And you can see that with age, it hopefully gets a little better. Maybe we learn with experience, or we're getting a little better, but that graph comes down. As you can see, the ages go across the bottom of that graph. There's less crashes for older drivers. And so if you are a younger driver, if you have younger drivers at home, it's really important we talk about the dangers of that, of being distracted, and preventing that, because we don't want to find our loved ones or children or grandkids or anybody else being in an accident due to those things that we can prevent. You've probably heard about the Utah Zero Fatalities campaign. They have a website as well that talks about distracted driving. One of the things they talked about is that the younger drivers are some of the most distracted, and they have stories on there, real-life stories of 120 teens that lost their lives on Utah roads, and many of those due to distracted driving. So we need to make sure that that's a focus of ours, not to encourage distracted driving. Maybe we need to teach our younger drivers to avoid distractions and things that cause accidents. Just a reminder on that. So the Department of Public Safety found distracted driving to be a number 5 leading cause of death. And the Utah Zero Fatalities campaign also found it to be a top 5 deadly behavior. It is a very risky thing that we do while we're driving, is being distracted from certain things, and we need to learn to prevent that. During the years of 2012 to 2016, they did a study. They found there were 108 deaths due to distracted driving, and 9% of all deaths on the roadways during that time frame. So definitely a huge concern, definitely a problem. You've probably been driving behind somebody at times and getting frustrated because they're weaving in and out of lanes and they're not paying attention. They're being, inconsiderate to other drivers, and you drive up along the side of them to see that they're playing on their phone. Those are things that we just have to make a priority not to do and to learn from as we drive around the roadways. So we're going to look at cell phones versus texting. We'll talk a little bit about the dangers of doing that. The Department of Public Safety had information that showed in the last 10 years there's been an increase in crashes due to texting. You can see the little red bars on that graph are getting a little bit larger as the years go on, and there's a little bit of a spike going on as well with cell phone use and crashing in the last, looks like 5 or 6 years back it's increased. So those are what we want to learn from. We want to learn to prevent those things. The key is we have to eliminate distractions, and when you're driving down the roadway, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of signs coming at you. There's people moving around, people on bicycles, cars coming in and out between you in traffic and things like that. And it really only takes 1 second to take your eyes off the road and can cause an accident. 1 minute, one distraction, one reaching for some object in your car. It only takes one thing that could cause a crash and maybe affect your life. Could affect your health, could affect somebody else. And that's something that you just don't want to have to live with if you take your eyes off the road and you're distracted for some reason and cause an accident. It's just not worth the risk sometimes. And so we need to remember that. Remember that you might think it's only 1 second, but that 1 second can be enough to change your life or the life of somebody else. So we need to think about those things as we go through the training today. So what distracts you? What are the things out there that could be the next thing that you're doing in your car as you're driving down the road? What is it that could be a temptation or a distraction to you of some kind that takes your eyes off the road? We're going to look at some of those things now, and as we go through this, I want you to think about, does this apply to you and your driving behaviors? Is this something you do on a regular basis, or are these no big deal and things that you do really well with? I'm going to show you about 10 things now that can be a real distraction for us. Obviously phones, we've talked about that already. Phones is probably the #1 top thing that can be one of the biggest distractions in the car. And it could be when that phone rings, you're tempted to pick that up and talk to somebody. Or it could be you hear it beep and ping and you think, oh, somebody just texted me, I've got to pick that up and see, I've got to text them back. It could be the phone that leads you to taking your eyes off the road, whether it's reaching for that phone, texting, using your fingers, having conversation. There's obviously a huge distraction with that. So we need to learn to eliminate those things. If the phone is a distraction to you, turn it off. Silence it. Put it in a glove box. Make it so that it's not a temptation or distraction to you as you're driving. Even the radio, the controls in the car, the things that you can set, the knobs, the controls that they have now. Cars are they've increased on their technology a lot lately, and some of those things take a while to figure out, and it can be a real problem playing around with the controls in your car and the radio and things like that as you're driving. So think about doing that before learning your car, learning the controls before you go to drive. That way you're not distracted and you can focus on what you're doing in the car. Conversation, even talking to somebody next to you is enough to be a distraction. It takes your mind off of certain things, maybe a little bit off on focus, so you need to be careful with conversation as well. And we're not saying that you can't have a conversation, but we're saying don't let it get in the way of your safe driving and doing what you need to do to stay safe. Apps on the phone, GPS, using a GPS device or even the GPS in the phones. We can eliminate that by making sure we program those things in advance before we drive. Do it while your car is parked, and not while you're driving would be the best way to eliminate that. So maybe those are some things that might affect you as you drive. Maybe those are a distraction we need to think about or eliminate. How about reaching for items? Have you ever had something fall down next to you and you have to pick it up, or you're reaching in the back seat as you're driving? Those could be a distraction, taking your eyes off the road as well. Food that we eat, eating food and driving, even drinks, things can spill, or you're trying to reach for something as you're driving and take your eyes off the road just for a second. That can lead to a distracted driving issue. Music as well. So one of the challenges I have is I really like to listen to music as I drive. and I drive a lot, I use the Spotify app, and sometimes your music comes to an end of what you want to listen to, and you want to change, to listen to another band or different music or things like that, and it can be a distraction to try to control that while you're driving. So think about ways that you can prevent music from being a distraction. Even music itself, you might find the music really enjoying and something you really are into at the moment, but as you're driving, you have to realize, you know what, driving really is the number one priority right now, and you have to maintain that focus while listening to music. Even talk radio. I've heard talk radio shows where I'll be hearing sports talk radio and hearing about the football scores and everything that happened over the weekend, and sometimes I realize, wow, I need to pay attention to where I'm going and where I'm at and everything going on around me. So even the radio, even music can be a distraction to us. Have you ever been lost in thought as you're driving? You could be driving for a long distance and it's really quiet, you're by yourself in your car, and you can find yourself thinking really deep on things and thinking about life and everything going on, and sometimes that can take your focus away as well, not paying attention to where you are. You might even go past an exit that you thought you were supposed to go on and realize, wow, how did I get here already? I was lost in thought thinking about something completely different. And I've had several classes where I've taught defensive driving in the last year or so where people say kids can be a distraction. And as the picture shows here, you can see some kid is just screaming and crying and fighting. Kids can be demanding. They can ask lots of questions and need things, and they can definitely take your eyes off the road if you let them. And so maybe there's ways that we can eliminate those things. I'm not recommending eliminating the kids, but eliminate things in a way that they don't become a problem for us as we're driving. Maybe there's ways to manage those things, put them in a location that's a better location while you're driving, or turn phones off, or whatever that might be. Do the things that you need to do to prevent accidents and not be distracted. Another angle on this could be driving drowsy. Have you ever been really tired and you're going down the road and you're just fighting it? Your eyelids are getting heavy. You'll find yourself in a state that's just not as aware. You're not as alert. Your reaction time is diminished because you're really tired. Those are things that can also become a distraction to us as well. So think about driving drowsy and issues with that. There's been a lot of studies done on what causes distracted driving, especially in recent years with cell phone use. And the National Safety Council, they put out a study called Understanding the Distracted Brain. And what they found is that even hands-free use of a cell phone and talking as you're driving can still be a distraction. They looked at how the brain actually works. It's kind of a psychological study, but they found that it's really a brain drain to be doing multiple things at one time. Our brain's already doing lots of different things. It's running our body, it's running our heart rate, allowing us to breathe, the awareness and everything we have, all the movements. There's a lot going on with our brain. And when you're driving, if you try to add something else into that mix, whether it's talking on the phone or conversations or thinking about other things, it really does take away from your focus. They found that can be a real issue that leads to impaired performance. And so they looked at, it is a distraction to talk on the phone, whether it's holding that phone or whether it's hands-free. Either way, there's certain things that take our focus off of what we should be and not driving safely. So we need to think about that, the risk of talking and driving. So again, phones can be a huge distraction. We need to learn to avoid those. They found that if you're talking on the phone and driving at the same time, you have 4 times the risk of being in a traffic accident. Texting and driving, even higher risk. They say that's 6 times the risk because you're actually taking your eyes off of the road. You're using your hands and texting with your fingers. You're looking at the phone. You're talking about things. You're thinking about conversation. And they find that that's equivalent to being similar to a 0.16 blood alcohol content because you're so distracted. You're so similar to being impaired that you just can't focus on what's the priority and what you really need to be doing at that time to drive safely. So think about that. Phones might be something we really want to, put down or turn off or not let that get in the way of your life and your safety and your health. So distracted driving, what it leads to is lack of awareness. There's this thing called inattention blindness where you're so focused on one thing that you're missing the obvious. You're missing what's really out there, what could jump in front of you, or a traffic condition that could change. You're just totally unaware of what's going on because you're so focused on something else. And so as you're driving, we don't want people to be obviously blinded by things or unaware of things that can be a real hazard. It leads to slower response time. If traffic were to stop quickly or if something were to jump out in front of you, you may not have that reaction time to stop that vehicle or pay attention or be aware enough to stop and avoid an accident. Driving distracted takes your eyes off the road, and you've seen many people that have problems staying in the lane, weaving in and out of lanes, having a hard time staying in between the lanes there. So it's a real problem. It's something we need to think about. And each of us, when we get in the car behind the wheel, it's up to us to make sure that we're driving safely. It's our responsibility to get passengers to the location safely and return home safe each day. That's up to us. And when you're in the car, it's your responsibility to stay focused and do what you need to with the awareness and things to not be distracted. So what we need to do is we need to realize that we can be distracted. We need to look as we're driving around, and before we drive, we need to identify those problem areas. What is it that could distract us? What could get in the way? Is there something that I need to take care of now before I drive, before I put myself in a dangerous situation? Those are things to think about. We need to remove those temptations. Don't let them be a problem while you're driving. Put them in safe locations and manage those things. Plan before we get on the road, before we take off. Plan your routes and put that in your GPS ahead of time so that you don't have to do those things while you're driving. That's really important. And just taking personal responsibility for your safety and the safe driving of that vehicle. It's really up to each one of us to do that to keep each other safe as we drive. So some questions you might ask yourself. What could distract me? What is there in the car that could distract me before I go driving? What do I need to take care of? And maybe as you're driving down the road, you could ask yourself, is this risky? Is this too much risk that I'm taking on? If I pick up this object, or if I turn on my phone, or if I control something right now, is that a risky maneuver that I'm putting myself and others at risk? Or can it wait? Can it wait for just a little bit until I get to a safe location to take care of something? Those are things you need to think about to address your own distracted driving. And we need to ask ourselves, what is the priority? What is the priority of driving? Well, it's to get from point A to point B, but it's to get there safely. It's to arrive without accident, without injury. It's to do it the right way and safe on the roadways, and that really is the most important thing that we need to think about. So there might be some things that apply to you as we've gone through this today. There might be several things you've thought about that could be a distraction or a temptation for you to take your eyes or focus off the road. And I just want you to think about those things. What can we all do to be safer? How can we improve? So what are your goals from the training today? Was there something that stood out to you, something that you want to learn from, or something new that you want to do going forward to eliminate a distraction while driving? There's lots of things that we talked about that you could do, but think about what's the best way to do that. How do you avoid the accident? How do you keep yourself and others safe? The goal is take something away from this today and hopefully save a life, save your own life, or avoid accident in some way. So to summarize, we looked at a lot of distractions. We need to make sure that we identify those and eliminate those as we're driving. It's really important that we stay alert. There's a lot coming at us as we're driving down the roads with traffic and signs and weather and all kinds of other things going on. It's really important that we stay alert, stay aware of what's going on around you, and stay focused on the priority. Remember what is most important. The most important thing is your life and your safety and health, and a phone or food or music or anything like that should not take priority over the most important things. So hopefully that's some good reminders. Jason, do we have any questions out there today?
I don't have any questions yet, but folks, type those into the chat box or the Q&A box, and we'll get those right to Brent right now. Well, this is such an important subject, and I guess the thing that was popping through my mind while people are typing their questions in was all of us are subject to distraction. All of us get distracted, and I think that's probably the most important thing is just admitting that, hey, I can be distracted. I can have things. Sometimes we think we're infallible, but that's definitely not the case, and all of us are subject to that. And I think about Doug, Brent, and myself. Between the three of us, we put well over 100,000 miles a year on the road, and there's a lot of times when you're jumping in the vehicle coming back from St. George or Moab or somewhere like that, and it's going to be a long drive, and planning ahead, like Brent said, is so important. So we're going to have a snack, we're going to have a drink, we're going to have something like that, but plan ahead so those are accessible and easy to get to. All right, I'm looking for questions here, and I'm not seeing any. All right, I got no questions coming in. You must have covered the subject so well that there's nothing left to be asked or said. Final words?
Everybody be safe. Remember the priority. Hope you have a great day and stay safe out there.
All right. Thanks, Brent. Good job today. Be
Thank
safe,
you.
folks. We'll be doing this again at 9 o'clock. Doug, do you have anything to say? I thought I stepped on Doug there. So
there you go. Oh, that was great. Thanks, Brent. Good job.
Thank you.
We'll be doing this again at 9 o'clock. So if any of your coworkers missed this, you can go ahead and let them know about it. If anybody needs a link to get in, just send me an email to jason@utahtrust.gov. And then Doug will be talking about workers' compensation case management at 10 o'clock. So we'll look forward to seeing you on both of those. Go out and have a safe day.